This presentation is going to have a deeper look at this week's articles. I'm going to try my very best to answer what does user-centered mean. The articles that I'm going to be looking at include Audience Involved Toward a Participatory Model of Writing by Robert R. Johnson, On Theory, Practice, and Method Toward a Heuristic Research Methodology for Professional Writing by Patricia Sullivan and James E. Porter, User-Centered Technology and Participatory Culture by Robert R. Johnson et al. Beckon experienced the danger of control and the promise of encounters in the study of user experience by Patricia Sullivan. And lastly, a technique to increase the usability of e-learning websites by Q and et al. The first article I'm going to be looking at is Audience Involved Toward a Participatory Model of Writing. Johnson asks the question, what are the benefits of audience involvement? Johnson is very persuasive when he argues that audience involvement is necessary and essential. He goes on to explain that the involved audience is an actual participant in the writing process who creates knowledge and determines much of the content of the discourse. And this audience involved model contrasts to the more traditional addressed or invoked audience models. In other words, Johnson states that the notion of audience has been mainly seen as a fictional construct rather than something that is real and tangible. And when he is describing the audience involved model, he uses terms of Aristotle's epistemological taxonomy that has three types of knowledge. One is theoretical and episteme, which is math and philosophy. Number two, practical and praxis, which includes ethics and politics. And number three, productive or techne, which includes the arts. Johnson emphasizes the use of productive knowledge and thus the significance of the knowledge and therefore the needs of the users themselves. He gives two excellent concrete examples of how technical communicators can engage with their users. The first one is the voicemail system at Miami University. Several cases of user breakdown, such as different concepts of the term menu from the system developers and users. With the application of the audience involved model, the users in turn had provided the writers with knowledge that could be used to argue for design changes. The second example is the low fidelity prototyping techniques of interface design to make screen designs for the university's career office. Low fidelity prototyping is a affordable, cheap technique for involving the user in the product design. The end results show that the developers and the users wanted different things. The developers wanted to convert to online documentation, while users wanted to keep print documentation. Johnson also convincingly argues that technical communicators have an ethical duty to involve users. Some of the main points that I got from this particular article: yes, we do have an ethical responsibility to involve users in the development of the products that they will be using. Otherwise, we will not have a full understanding of the potential paramount problems in regards to the use of the product. User experience research is so much more than it sounds. In the past 2 weeks, I've learned so much about user experience research. It's problem solving, it's translation, it's critical thinking, it's collaboration, it's negotiation, it's customer service. Also, with the audience involved model, it definitely is going to require extra time and effort throughout the development process, but will make a product more useful for its audience and definitely reduce the number of usability problems in the future. Therefore, I do believe that the pros outweigh the cons. The second article is on theory, practice, and method toward a heuristic research methodology for professional writing. And Sullivan and Porter asks these questions. Is there a false binary between theory and practice? Could there be more than one theory, one practice, one method out there? They make a very strong case for the ways in which false binary has been created between theory and practice. The binary between theory and practice is false because they both suffer from limitations. On their own, they're weak. For example, theory cannot account for a specific instance, and practice is limited. They also do a nice job with arguing that a better approach is to equally value theory, practice, and methodology. And they want research to be viewed as praxis, which would appreciate both theory and practice. Praxis refers to a type of conduct that negotiates between positions rather than grounding itself in any particular position. I think that by having this perspective, making mythology changeable and not fixed, it can only lead to good things, good possibilities for research. So Sullivan and Porter, they do a nice job demonstrating the triangulated model, placing the equal value in all three areas: theory, practice, and methodology. And my final thought is that this may be quite appealing to many technical communicators who struggle with the separation between theory and practice. And to have this all interchangeable or have it be together, this is very appealing. Okay, so the next article is user centered technology and participatory culture. Johnson et al. Asks the questions: which lens should user experience be examined from? What are the benefits in regards to the science community and the non science community working together? The authors state that the usability helps fill the gap between science and rhetoric and claims that usability works best when it understands and respects the knowledge making process of a wide range of disciplines. Reviews Sullivan's contribution to the between rhetoric and usability, argues that usability relies on the multiple epistemologies to triangulate knowledge making. In other words, from my opinion, it seems that they're criticizing the trends in usability studies and that put the issue of usability and user interface at the end of the design stage of the product. Also, the authors seem to conclude that usability studies should be incorporated and analyzed through a rhetorical lens throughout the whole process, before, middle, and end. They also conclude that rhetoricians need to be involved throughout the design process, enhancing both teaching and learning when using technology. For my own uh, understanding from this article, it seems that science and rhetoric together make a stronger product. We need to be taught the issues surrounding usability as part of communication, resulting in deeper understanding of the scientific community by culture and deeper understanding of culture by scientists. Again, in order to create better products, usability studies need to include rhetorical concepts. All right, the next article is called Beckon Encounter Experience, the Danger of Control and the Promise of Encounters in the Study of User Experience. Here, Sullivan asks these questions. Why do we need to study encounters as part of user experience? What happens when there is an unconstrained environment? Sullivan states that there needs to be a good balance between openness and control for researchers to understand user experiences. Claims that a better balance between openness and control includes observing, doing, and reflecting. Asserts that encountering users' experience without controlling them opens us to hearing and seeing beyond what we expect, beckons us the new or unexpected. I also want to add that Sullivan seems to believe that openness to otherness is very much needed in today's digital world. And for us to have a better and deeper understanding of users with our products, we need to listen to them and speak to them so we can ultimately design and build better products for them. Sullivan also talked about control, and here are some things that she mentions. Number one, sort user experience into neat domains. Pretty much helps reduce uncertainties when work culture calls for new kinds of technologies that better supports the desired changes. Number two, identify and question roles users play. This has to do with qualitative research. Three, establish and maintain boundaries. Four, mine themes, metaphors, and analogies. Again, qualitative research that includes interviews and or observations. And ultimately, this helps create new understanding of user experience data. Some final comments on this particular article. It seems like Sullivan is really a proponent of qualitative research for its human stories in regards to user experience research. Also states that too much control can diminish the research, and ultimately, as technical communicators, we need to listen and be more empathetic to the other and be willing to open up to encounters. We should view user experience as global and not just local. And with these diverse encounters come with new rich experiences to make more empathetic and better products. The last article is called A Technique to Increase the Usability of E-Learning Websites. And the authors asks these questions or this question, how to bridge the gap between mental model and designer's perception to lead to more usability. The authors they want to reduce the gap between mental model of the user and the designer's perception through developing e-learning usability evaluation model. They use a questionnaire survey testing techniques which help to improve the e-learning system. And in their research, they focus on these factors: the designer's perception, the conceptual model based on the user's perception, the user's mental model, and the learning system evaluation parameters. I also want to add that I think the main goal of the technical communicator is to have the user interface communicate the basic nature of of the system and do it well. And then it goes on, and the authors state that the understanding the concept of mental models can help you to make sense of usability problems in design. So I think that when technical communicators do not know uh, the vast diversity in users, we cannot understand the accessibility or usability issues that some users will have. And therefore, this will create bad experiences for those users. So ultimately, to reduce the gap between users' mental model and designers' perception, you need to conduct surveys, interviews, feedback from users time to time. It seemed like in this article they preferred interviews because the answers were in depth and they know exactly what the users want. And ultimately, websites and e learning and virtual classrooms are only increasing. So, my last few thoughts on this article is that each user is different with different needs. And when there's no communication between user and technical writer, this leads to a bad experience due to cognitive burden because the lack of accessibility and usability. This is a link to the article that I just talked about. Final thoughts on this week's articles. Some main points here. Technical communicators need to empathize with user experience in order to create the best product. I felt like this was a common thread throughout the articles. Users must be part of the design process at the very beginning for the best results. It seems like if you want to avoid or prevent problems, just talk to the users, do a survey, do interviews, get some feedback, listen to them because ultimately the product is for them. And in a way, I guess they are the expert. I also thought this was a very important part of this week's reading that when it comes to user center, it is our ethical duty to allow users to know about the product and allow them to ask us questions and to be involved. And we must equally value theory, practice, and methodology. They're all interconnected and they're all necessary. Another common theme in this week's readings, it seems that science needs rhetoric and rhetoric needs science. Both are needed for best practices. And lastly, the human stories are just as important as the uh, statistical analyses in user experience research.